There comes a point after loss or major change when you realize you don't want to explain it anymore. Not because it doesn't matter, not because it's resolved, but because explanation no longer feels useful. This episode is about that shift, about what it's like to carry something quietly, without turning it into a story for others, and without needing it to be understood in order to be real. Early on, explanation can feel necessary. You may try to name what happened, describe how you're feeling, or help others understand why you're different now. Sometimes this helps. Sometimes it creates connection. But over time, explanation can start to feel like another form of labor. You repeat the same words. You answer the same questions. You translate something that no longer fits neatly into language. And eventually, something in you grows tired of doing that work. This isn't withdrawal. It's discernment. You begin to notice that not everything needs to be shared in order to be carried. Some experiences lose clarity when they're spoken too often. Some things stay intact only when they're left alone. This can feel unfamiliar, especially if you were once someone who processed things out loud. You may notice yourself becoming quieter, not because you're disconnected, but because you no longer need reflection from the outside to know what's true. There's often relief here, quiet relief. The relief of not having to explain why you're slower, or why your priorities have shifted, or why certain things no longer hold the same weight. You stop rehearsing explanations in your mind. You stop preparing answers that may never be asked. What replaces explanation isn't emptiness, it's space. You may still talk about ordinary things. You may still participate in conversation. But the inner experience that once demanded narration now rests without commentary. This can feel isolating at first. Not because you're alone, but because you're no longer using language to bridge the gap between inner and outer worlds. Silence can feel exposed when it first appears, but over time, that silence becomes sturdy. You realize that being understood isn't always necessary for being connected. Presence carries its own form of communication, one that doesn't rely on detail or disclosure. This episode isn't about secrecy, it's about sovereignty. About recognizing that your experience doesn't need validation in order to exist. You may notice that when you stop explaining, certain relationships shift. Some people lean in more, others lean away. This isn't a judgment of either response. It's simply how connection reorganizes around honesty. You're no longer performing coherence for the sake of comfort. There can also be moments where silence feels misunderstood. Others may interpret it as distance, moodiness, or disengagement. You're allowed to let that misunderstanding exist without correcting it. Not everything needs clarification. Carrying something quietly doesn't mean you're suppressing it. Suppression requires effort. What's happening here is different. It's integration without display. You're allowing experience to live where it belongs, without relocating it into conversation. This changes how you move through the world. You're less reactive, less eager to explain yourself, less interested in making your internal state legible. Not because you don't care, but because you trust your own awareness more than external confirmation. There may still be moments when you choose to speak, when explanation feels natural, when sharing feels right. Silence doesn't eliminate choice. It restores it. You speak when it serves connection, not when it serves reassurance. This episode isn't asking you to become quiet. It's acknowledging that quiet may already be happening and that it doesn't need to be fixed. You don't owe anyone a narrative for what you're carrying. You don't need to make your experience accessible in order for it to be legitimate. Carrying something without explanation isn't avoidance. It's respect. Respect for the complexity of what you're living. Respect for the limits of language. Respect for your own capacity. If you're listening to this and noticing that you've stopped explaining certain things, you're not becoming distant. You're becoming settled. If these reflections help that experience feel less isolating, you're welcome to stay. Liking the video helps it reach others who may be quietly carrying more than they speak about. And if you want to keep a steady space like this as the season continues, you can subscribe, not for answers, but for continuity. If someone you care about has gone quiet in ways you don't fully understand, you're welcome to share this with them, only if it feels right. Some things don't need to be explained to be held with care. They simply need room to exist.